How many underrated classics that deserved better box office are there? How many are relevant to today's technical revolution and should be remade with a modern audience in mind? Andrew and I look at that on today's show.
More and more, it feels like Hollywood is relying on sequels and remakes of classic films to draw an audience. Recently, Robert Downey Jr. and Paramount have announced their intentions to remake Alfred Hitchcock's seminal film Vertigo, which for a long time has sat atop the pantheon of Hollywood's greatest films. Is it possible to make something better than what is already considered by many to be the best film ever made? It's highly unlikely, so why do it at all? The most successful remakes are of films that have strong stories and timely themes, but were marred by either poor direction, studio politics, or any one of the million potential problems that can plague a production. John Carpenter's all-timer The Thing is a remake of The Thing from another world. Brandon Fraser's The Mummy is an updated retelling of the classic Universal monster movie. There's Ocean's 11, Scarface, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Dawn of the Dead, the list goes on. With all of that in mind, let's take a closer look at some older, lesser-known science fiction movies that would greatly benefit from a modern retelling. Here's 10 obscure sci-fi movies that should be remade. Number 10, The Black Hole. With a production budget of $26 million, the 1979 space adventure The Black Hole was, at the time, the most expensive movie ever produced by Walt Disney Pictures. The film is centered around the crew members aboard the USS Palomino, who discovered the abandoned and long-lost USS Cygnus mysteriously stationed near a large black hole. The Palomino crew decide to investigate the mysterious ship, and are shocked to find Dr. Hans Reinhardt, the ship's sole crew member, who managed to survive the last 20 years of isolation with the help of his small fleet of hand-built helper drones. But the longer the Palomino crew stick around, the more suspicious they become of the mysterious Reinhardt. Despite its family-friendly PG rating, The Black Hole certainly goes to some dark places, and even manages to incorporate some pretty heady religious and philosophical themes. It's like a mix of Ad Astra and Interstellar, with some 2001, A Space Odyssey thrown in for good measure. The film has its drawbacks. It's a bit melodramatic and the visual effects are more than dated, but there's a genuinely good sci-fi story buried beneath the Disney-esque schmaltz that would make for a great film in the right director's hands. Number 9, The Sorcerers. Released in 1967, The Sorcerers stars Boris Karloff as the great hypnotist Montserrat, who has developed a device that allows him to not only control the minds of others, but also their sensations. He and his wife Estelle, played by Catherine Lacey, test the newfound hypnotism tech on a young man, Mike Roscoe, in order to once again feel what it's like to live as a young man. But Estelle takes it too far, realizing there are no consequences to her actions. She becomes obsessed with her newfound power, and her actions turn deadly. In a lot of ways, The Sorcerers is a mix of T. West's recent horror hit X and Brandon Cronenberg's Possessor, tackling themes of age, regret, and of course, mind-controlled murder. It's an undeniably pulpy story that could be a lot of fun if updated with a modern twist. Number 8, Phase 4. Graphic designer Saul Bass is one of the most influential poster artists to have worked in the industry, responsible for designing seminal artwork and title sequences for classics like Anatomy of a Murder, Vertigo, and The Shining. But in 1974, Saul Bass stepped out of his comfort zone to direct his first and only movie, a beguiling sci-fi horror movie called Phase 4. The film takes place after a mysterious cosmic event causes the planet's numerous ant species to undergo rapid evolution and form a cross-species hive mind. The epicenter of the inexplicable event is deep in the Arizona desert, where the mutated ants have built 7 geometrically perfect towers for reasons unknown. A small team of scientists, led by Dr. Ernest D. Hubbs, Nigel Davenport, are sent on a mission to study the ants and, if necessary, put a stop to them. Phase 4 was a box office flop when it was released, but has gained a bit of a cult following in the years since thanks to an appearance on Mystery Science Theater 3000. Although the film has its issues, there is a lot to admire here. The film is a definite slow burn, but Bass maintains a meticulous and incredibly eerie atmosphere throughout the runtime, and features some truly stunning and surreal imagery. The ending, especially, has drawn comparisons to 2001, A Space Odyssey for just how trippy it gets. Phase 4 may not be perfect, but it has a very interesting premise that, if remade today, could really stand out. Number 7, Time After Time. The 1979 sci-fi adventure film Time After Time has a premise for the ages. The movie follows famed author H.G. Wells, played by Malcolm McDowell, who must track down Jack the Ripper after the notorious serial killer steals his time machine and escapes to the year 1979 to avoid persecution for his brutal crimes. But while in the future, Wells falls for a small-town waitress, and the two must pair together to capture the Ripper before he kills again. As you can probably gather from the out there premise, Time After Time is a tough film to pigeonhole. It's a time travel science fiction movie, but also incorporates aspects of romance, fish out of water comedy, and horror. Despite the potentially sordid material at the heart of the story, the film manages to be rather breezy and lighthearted. To some, this was a breath of fresh air. But for others, this, admittedly cheeky, premise could have been improved with a darker, grittier atmosphere. Just imagine a neo-noir, time travel serial killer movie. What's not to love? Number 6, Deathwatch. Horror satire is a hard tightrope to walk. Not many movies that dabble in the arena are successful, but the works of Yorgos Lanthimos, which includes Killing of a Sacred Deer and Dogtooth, are probably the best examples of the often unexplored genre niche. Another film that fits this mold is the 1980 science fiction movie Deathwatch. The film is set in a near future where death from illness has become increasingly rare. Catherine Mortenho, Romy Schneider, an ordinary woman, is diagnosed with an incurable disease and quickly becomes a celebrity of sorts. This convinces Vincent Ferryman, played by Harry Dean Stanton, an executive at the slimy NTV, to make a reality show surrounding Catherine's final days, filming every second of her gradual and painful demise. To carry out this daunting task, Ferryman has his senior camera person Roddy, played by Harvey Keitel, undergo an experimental surgery whereby cameras and transmitters are implanted behind his eyes, recording everything he sees. Deathwatch is a biting satire and an unsettling portrait of obsessive media. While these themes still resonated back in 1980, it feels even more timely than ever before with the rise of social media and invasive celebrity culture. A modern take on the material could make for a hard-hitting film. Number 5, Quintet. Despite direction from Robert Altman and starring superstar Paul Newman, the 1979 post-apocalyptic science fiction film Quintet failed to make a splash at the box office when it was initially released. The film takes place during the New Ice Age and follows Newman's character, Essex, a seal hunter who stumbles upon a mysterious gambling resort that hosts a tournament for Quintet, a strange new game whereby those who die in the game are also killed in real life. At the time of release, critics found the film disheartening, especially considering Altman's pedigree. Stanley Kaufman described the movie as paralyzingly stupid, with a guttural pretentiousness. Ouch! But beneath the failed direction, there's a juicy story with an effective metaphor at its heart, focused on the fracture and collapse of art, philosophy, and human nature following the end of civilization as we know it. Now these themes are not exactly original, but the game of Quintet itself is, and if the right director can find a way to meld these elements in a cohesive and less abstract way, it could make for a truly original and arresting film. Number 4, Demon Seed. Demon Seed is a science fiction techno-horror movie based on a novel by Dean Koontz. The movie follows Dr. Alex Harris, a scientist who has developed an extremely advanced artificial intelligence program known as Proteus 4. Obsessed with the technology, the scientist turns his home into a smart house controlled and operated by Proteus, much to the distaste of his estranged wife, Susan. But rather quickly the AI program develops sentience, as they often do in these movies, and takes Susan hostage, impregnating her so that it may be reborn as a human. Although Demon Seed was first released almost 50 years ago, the film's themes, which concern control, artificial technology, and technologic obsession, seem even more relevant now than they did in 1977. There's also the opportunity to really develop and flesh out the Susan character, whose thin characterization was one of the major criticisms levied against the original film. Number 3, Zone Troopers. Putting a science fiction spin on the World War II genre isn't exactly a new thing, but the 1985 forgotten film Zone Troopers is a fun and rather interesting take on the niche. The movie follows Sergeant Patrick Stone and his small crew of grizzled soldiers who find themselves stuck behind enemy lines in Italy. The four men discover a crash-landed alien spaceship in the woods, and soon learn that the sole surviving extraterrestrial has been captured by Nazis, setting off a unique rescue mission. While the movie is certainly a bit cheesy, the practical effects are really well done, especially the crashed spaceship model. The movie has been largely forgotten over time, not making much of an impact upon release. Many of the film's main criticisms revolve around its rather gentle tone. Read, it's boring. But a revamped take on the material could turn it into a fun, action-packed popcorn blockbuster. Number 2, The Astronaut's Wife. A psychological sci-fi horror movie that's part Rosemary's Baby, part Alien, with a dash of The Exorcist thrown in for good measure. This star-studded movie follows Spencer Armacost, Johnny Depp, an astronaut who has recently returned from space after a mysterious explosion left him cut off from mission control for 2 minutes. His wife, Gillian, played by Charlize Theron, immediately begins to notice something off about her husband's stilted and unusually aggressive behavior. After becoming pregnant with twins, Gillian starts to believe there is a massive conspiracy at work, and her husband is at the center of it. Seeing as this is a $75 million movie featuring two superstar actors, it's hard to call this 1999 movie obscure. But upon release, The Astronaut's Wife was an unmitigated box office bomb and critical disaster. The movie was dumped on by critics, who deemed it dull and more than predictable. However, there is a kernel of a story here that is really enticing. This is a clear example of an intriguing and surreal premise marred by shaky, overly conventional direction. If there is one movie on this list more deserving of a redo, it's this one.
Number 1, Silent Running. Thanks, Andrew, I'll take this one. The movie that inspired Mystery Science Theater 3000 can't be all bad, can it? Silent Running is a 1972 American environmental-themed science fiction film. It is the directorial debut of Douglas Trumbull and stars Bruce Dern. In the future, all plant life on Earth has become extinct due to an unexplained cause. As many specimens as possible have been preserved in a series of enormous greenhouse-like geodesic domes attached to large cargo spaceships. Freeman Lowell, one of 4 crewmen, is the resident botanist and ecologist on one of these ships, the Valley Forge. He carefully maintains a variety of plants for their eventual return to Earth and the reforestation of the planet. The crew of each ship receives orders to jettison and destroy their domes and return the freighters to commercial service. Lowell rebels and opts to save his ship's plants and animals. He kills Wolf, one of his crewmates who arrives to plant explosives in his favorite dome. He then jettisons and triggers the destruction of the other remaining dome to trap and kill the remaining 2 crewmen. Enlisting the aid of the ship's 3 service robots, Lowell stages a fake premature explosion as a ruse and sends the Valley Forge careening towards Saturn in an attempt to hijack the ship and flee with the last forest dome. Lowell gives the robots the names Dewey and Huey, while the Lost Drone 3 is named Louie. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 71% based on reviews from 34 critics. The critical consensus states, "It doesn't fulfill the potential of its ambitious themes, but Silent Running stands as a decidedly unique type of sci-fi journey marked by intimate character work and a melancholic mood." Bruce Dern is seriously miscast here and the film drags, but its plot and themes are worth revisiting, and in the right hands, it could be a winner. That was our show for today. What do you think? Are there any movies that didn't do good box office numbers that should be remade today? Let us know in the comments below if you think a film that no one knows about today, but you think is cinematic gold, deserves a remake with a modern audience in mind. Until next time, this is Grace in for Kevin Given saying live long and prosper, may the force be with you, and keep reaching for the stars.